It's amazing to think back to when everyone suddenly had to shift online, right? I mean, it was a whirlwind for organizations to figure out how to adapt.
Definitely a huge turning point,
Hmm.
especially for community-based organizations, CBOs, right? All those in-person things they relied on, meetings, workshops, poof, had to find new ways to make those happen, and quick.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, how CBOs can make webinars work. We've
Yeah.
got this great guide here focused on capacity strengthening for CBOs.
Oh, cool.
It's by the Southern Africa Litigation Centre, SALC. So we're going to break down their practical advice and hopefully make it super clear, even, dare I say, fun for anyone listening who's thinking about bringing their events online.
I think one of the biggest things webinars do for CBOs is open up who they can reach, you know?
Right.
Suddenly, it doesn't matter so much where people are physically located. You can have folks join in who never would have been able to make it to an in-person event.
It's a total game changer for participation. And then, thinking practically, you might even save on things like venue costs, travel, which can be huge for CBOs, especially those working with smaller budgets.
It's all about making sure CBOs can keep doing what they do best, right?
Right.
At connecting, educating, sharing knowledge, but without being held back by those physical limitations.
Absolutely. And what we really liked about this SALC guide is how it focuses on making that transition to online as simple and straightforward as possible.
Okay.
We wanted to take away any of that overwhelm and show you that, as SLC puts it, webinars can actually be fun, easy, and very much doable. So let's get into it. What's the very first thing a CBO needs to think about if they want to host a webinar?
Well, SALC really emphasizes starting with the basics. Like step one, get crystal clear on your topic. What do you want to share? What specific knowledge or information are you focusing on? Keep it nice and tight. And then obviously who's going to be speaking? Who's going to be facilitating the whole thing? Getting those roles nailed down is super important.
Yeah, you've got to have that solid foundation. Now, the tech side of things can sometimes feel a bit daunting, right? The guide talks about choosing the right platform. They specifically mention Zoom and Jitsi. So how should a CBO go about making that decision?
Yeah, choosing the right platform is key. A lot of people are familiar with Zoom, right? But it actually has two main options, meeting and webinars. Knowing the difference is important for CBOs. Meeting is generally more for, back and forth. People can share their audio and video easily. Might be good for smaller groups, more discussion-based. Webinar gives you more control if you've got a larger audience. Often has things like a Q&A panel. You can manage who's sharing their screen and all that. SALC also makes a good point about security, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Things like making people register or using a waiting room can help you manage who actually gets into the event. They also mention Jitsi, specifically for discussions that need to be more confidential.
So it's not just picking a name, it's thinking about how interactive you want it to be and how big your audience is. Now, what about cost? Is that something CBOs need to be mindful of when choosing a platform?
Definitely. A lot of platforms, Zoom included, have free options, but they usually have limits, like on how long the meeting can be.
Yeah.
And SALC actually brings up a good point. If you're planning to have longer sessions or you're going to be doing these webinars regularly, it might be worth it to look into a paid subscription.
Makes sense.
You get more flexibility, more features, could be a good investment. And honestly, no matter what platform you're on, having a good internet connection is non-negotiable.
That's true.
You could have the most amazing content, but if your connection keeps dropping, it's going to be a rough experience.
Absolutely. So we've got the what's figured out, the who's involved, and the online where, so to speak. What's next?
Next up is timing. You got to get that right. SALC emphasizes how important it is to choose a date and time that works for your audience.
Makes sense.
And they have this great suggestion. Maybe think about lunchtime webinars for people who can't attend during work hours. That's a really practical thing for CBOs to consider.
Yeah, that's clever. Thinking about when your community is actually free and available. They also talk about the length of the webinar, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Keeping it concise, keeping it focused, usually way more effective than some marathon session that people have to be glued to for hours. If you do need to have a longer webinar, SALC suggests using icebreakers just to keep people engaged, make it a bit more interactive.
Love it. Okay, we've nailed down the when, the online where. How do we get people actually showing up? How does a CBO promote their webinar?
Promotion is everything. And SALC is all about using social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they're all great for reaching people both within your community and beyond.
I thought they had a really smart idea about boosting Facebook posts, too.
Yeah.
That way, you can target your audience more effectively, and it's pretty cost-effective, which is a bonus for CBOs.
Absolutely. And this is interesting, too. They talk about live streaming the webinar, maybe on Facebook or YouTube.
Oh, interesting.
That could really expand your reach. Even folks who can't actually participate in the webinar itself could watch it live, engage through comments.
That's a fantastic way to make it more accessible.
Yeah.
Okay, you've promoted it. People are signing up. What needs to happen behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly?
This is where practice comes in. SALC is big on this.
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
Have a practice session beforehand. Let your speakers, your facilitator, any interpreters you might have get comfortable with the platform. Figure out their roles, test their audio, video, all that.
Yeah.
It's the best way to make sure you catch any technical glitches before the actual event.
Definitely. Because, let's be real, technical difficulties can totally derail a webinar.
Oh, yeah.
And SALC also talks about using visuals, right, to make things more engaging.
Absolutely. Pictures, charts, even short video clips. Anything to break up the presentation and make the information a bit more dynamic and memorable.
It really helps, too, with understanding and keeping people's attention.
Totally.
I liked the suggestion about assigning co-hosts as well.
Oh, yeah?
Having someone dedicated to managing the tech stuff, like muting and unmuting, letting people in from the waiting room, that can really free up the main presenter to focus on delivering the content.
It's all about teamwork.
Right.
And SALC reminds us about recording the session.
Oh, right. So people who couldn't attend live can still benefit.
Exactly. But they also bring up a really important ethical point. Being transparent with your audience about the recording, making sure you have their consent, especially regarding any personal information they might share.
That's absolutely crucial. And during the webinar itself, they offer some tips for fostering interaction. Things like letting participants unmute themselves if it's appropriate, using the Q&A feature, encouraging people to chat. It's all about creating that sense of connection, even though everyone's online.
Absolutely. And then SALC talks a lot about accessibility, which is so important, especially for CBOs.
Yeah, it has to be a priority.
It all comes down to planning ahead. They give some really practical examples, like using big fonts and good contrast in your slides.
Oh, yeah, that helps a lot.
Providing descriptions for any images you're showing. Maybe you need sign language interpretation. They even talk about language preferences and possibly having interpretation services. If you think ahead about these things, you can make your webinar truly inclusive.
So many great takeaways there. Okay, we're nearing the end of the webinar. What's the last piece of advice from SALC?
Follow-up. It's key. SALC emphasizes sharing those presentation slides, any other materials, with the attendees afterward. They also suggest maybe having an attendance register.
Oh, okay.
Could be useful for your organization's records, for reporting, things like that.
Great points. So let's do a quick recap for our CBO listeners out there. We talked about clearly defining your topic, your speakers, your facilitator. Choose a platform that fits your needs. Think about security in the length of your sessions. Make sure you have a solid internet connection. Schedule it strategically. Keep it engaging. Promote, promote, promote. Social media is your friend. You could even try live streaming. And definitely have a practice run beforehand. Use visuals. Have some co-hosts for support. Record, but do it responsibly. Encourage interaction, make it accessible, and always follow up.
That's a great summary. Listening to all this makes me think, if you're part of a CBO, how could you use webinars to reach more people and make a bigger impact? What's a topic that's really important to you, something that could be really effective in this format? Think about the potential to connect with new people, share valuable information. You could really amplify the work your CBO is doing. Like SALC's guide shows, putting together a webinar isn't just doable, it can be an incredibly valuable tool for CBOs.